to just check in and see what I thought about all of these. Since that is a pretty high number, I'm going to go through these kind of quick, because even if I devote 30 seconds for each book, I mean, that's like a 25-minute video. So I'll go through this kind of quick. If you want to see any of these reviews, all of my monthly wrap-ups, I'll link a playlist in the description below with all of those. Those are actually my favorite videos to shoot, because I get to talk about everything that I've read. And all of these books, I talk about 1 or 2 minutes to give you a little bit of a better idea in those reviews than you will get here. Okay, so first of all, the tiers that I have, I change this up a little bit. Normally I do best of the best, truly outstanding, good to great, mid, and then skip it. There are no skip it's that I read this year. I did have one DNF, but I'm not going to include that because I don't think it's good to rate a book that you haven't completely read. So I split up the good to great into 2 different tiers. So this will skew a little bit low. So when you see some books in kind of that 4th tier, the old C tier, that doesn't mean that I didn't like them. It just means that it's a good book. Still pretty good, okay? The tier maker just kind of did this randomly. I wanted to originally do this in the order that I read them, but that would have took way too much time to sort all this. The only sorting that I did in the bottom of the screen there is I put all of the books from various series together so that I could talk about those continuously. Now, a lot of my tier lists, I do rank them in the tiers. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to simply put everything into its tier, and you can be the judge as far as what's the top or the bottom of any of those tiers. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with a book by Kate Atkinson called Emotionally Weird. Now, Kate Atkinson is a favorite author of mine. She made my top 10 author list. I don't remember where she was, like maybe 5 or 6, something like that. Great author. Unfortunately, this is a book that I did not enjoy. This is a book that's kind of skippable, so I'm going to put that one as the first one in kind of the mid category there. So not her best. She has some great ones. I did some great reviews of some Atkinson books, but that wasn't one of her best in there. But anyway, let's look at the next book, The Way of Edan by Philip Chase. You all know about this book. I did a dedicated review of this book. I thought it was really fantastic. First book in the Edan series. I would say somewhere between truly outstanding and great. I'm going to put it at great, and we'll see what the rest of the series does for me. I'm holding off. The second book is out. I'm holding off reading all 3 of them until all 3 of them are out. So I will read the last 2 books probably October, since I know the 3rd book comes out at the end of September. All right, next we have the Riftward Saga. So we have Magician by Raymond E. Feist. I read this as the single volume for the first time. I had read the 2-volume originally. And I think Magician is a really, really great series, and I really, really enjoyed that book. I liked it a lot better as a single volume than as the 2-volume that I originally read it. The next one is Silverthorn. Same thing. I think it's a really great book. It's a quest, and I love how all 3 of these books really just truly can stand on their own, even though they're part of a trilogy. And the last one, A Darkness of Sethanon, I think as well. I think all 3 of those books are truly great and deserve to be in that tier. All right, the next book, this was Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I listened to this one. So this was an audiobook listen that I enjoyed listening to. And this was a big surprise because this ended up as my book of the month that I read it and the month that I listened to it. And it's kind of some folksy Texas wisdom, and it talks about a lot of his method acting and things like that. And I loved it. I thought it was truly outstanding. It's going to be the first one in that tier. It's really surprised me. And I will say, I rarely say like an audiobook would be better than a real book, but hearing him deliver his own book, I mean, it was pretty outstanding. All right. Well, we just started the first truly outstanding entry. Now for the very first best of the best, and that's Lonesome Dove. The very first book I read this year is one of the best books that I have read this year. Probably a top 10 book of all time, at least a top 15. Although I'll tell you, I use that term a lot, top 15 book, and I made a list of them a couple weeks ago, and there were like 40 of them. So I don't know where it stacks up until I do that top 10 video, but as far as this year is concerned, it is one of the best books I have read. All right, up next, Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. This was an earlier book by Martin that is a vampire tale, and it's set on the Mississippi. It wasn't quite what I was expecting, but I think it was good. I think my expectations weren't in the right place. I was hoping for more of a vampire tale kind of set around New Orleans and all of that, but it wasn't really that. It was a lot of sailing and ships on the river and things like that. But the ending was great, and I do recommend it. I mean, this shows how highly regarded these books are in this tier list. Just looking at these, I'm pretty sure right now all of the books in the great tier I gave a 4.5 out of 5. And Fever Dream, I'm pretty sure I gave it a 4 out of 5. So you just see that I read some great books this year. So if some of your favorites are only good or great, I still really enjoyed them. Next one is a book by John Cronshaw called The Fool. This was a novella, and I didn't really connect with this one. This is self-pub work, and it was a novella, and it was free. You can get through the author. I didn't connect with the writing style because he's one of those authors that writes like super short chapters, and that's really not for me. And I didn't really love the main character in this one, but it is something that is very fast-paced and might be someone might enjoy that one, but it wasn't for me. All right, on to the Chronicles of Narnia. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which in my box set is numbered number 2, but should be the first one that you read. It should be, as I forget, I wish I could give credit, but somebody told me everybody's first entrance into Narnia should be through the wardrobe. So you should read this one first. That's why this is the order that I read them, publication order that I'll put onto the tier list. I think Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe is great. It was a really great read. I enjoyed it a lot more than I did as a kid. Now, Prince Caspian was probably my least favorite of them all. I'm going to say that was kind of mid. I thought it was kind of meandering and didn't have a focused narrative like a lot of the other books that I'll rank a lot higher here were. Voyage of the Dawn Treader, truly outstanding read. Very poignant ending, kind of a sad ending, can probably leave some readers in tears, and I really enjoyed that one of my favorites. Silver Chair was good, not quite up to the great tier. Horse and His Boy, it's interesting because I really enjoyed this one. I'm going to put it in the great tier, and I had several people commented that it was one of their least favorite, but I thought it was a focused narrative and kind of just a really good story. Magician's Nephew, truly outstanding. Maybe my favorite. I don't know if that or Dawn Treader. Those were easily my 2 favorites in the series. A little darker than the rest, and I think it's a great book, but not the place you should start because it's better if you haven't started there. Last Battle was good. It wrapped things up well. The last chapter and the last couple chapters really were fantastic, but the story itself wasn't quite as good. So Narnia is kind of all over the place, but I did really enjoy the series a lot more than I thought I would. All right, next series up, I read 5 of Michael Moorcock's novels with Elric of Melniboné, and these were part of an omnibus. I read the first 4 of the first omnibus, and then I have the second one I just started. So the first one, Elric of Melniboné, I think most of these are probably going to be in the great category. I would say that the first one was really great. I love the world building. I love the character. Fortress of the Pearl, I would say, is a little cut below, although I heard some people say they liked it a bit more. I didn't like it quite as much. I felt, like I do with a lot of these, I think some of these are very uneven because of the way that these books were put together. A lot of times, these full novels were originally like a couple novellas or longer short stories that he put together in novel form, so they're can be a little bit disjunct, and I felt that Fortress of the Pearl. Sailor in the Seas of Fate, I thought was great. I liked how this was the first one where he introduces kind of his eternal champion and his multiverse, and that was a lot of fun, getting to see these other versions of Elric, or this eternal champion. And then The Weird of the White Wolf, another one that was a bit uneven. I think the first 2/3 of it were fantastic, and then the last part didn't quite match. And then The Vanishing Tower, the first one, I would say this one's back up to the great. The thing that I like about just the progression of what I'm reading these Elric books is that they're continually getting darker, and I like that aspect of it. It's some very, very good fantasy. All right, next one. This is another one that's a surprise, and it's probably going to surprise people where I'm going to put it, but this was Star Wars. This is Episode 3. Oh, I guess I didn't put the 2 Star Wars together. Episode 3... Revenge of the Sith, the novelization by Matthew Stover, is fantastic. Maybe the best Star Wars novel I've read. It is remarkably well written. It has one of the best uses of second person in anything I've ever read. It's very, very well done. They gave the authors a lot of leeway to really flesh out a lot that what was going on, and you really see that the big turn at the end of this one, it was the only decision that could be made. Outstanding novel. So let me find, I think I read it this year. Well, maybe I read it. Oh, there it is. Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones by R.A. Salvatore. This one's just good. I mean, it's probably my least favorite of the prequel films. Probably my second least favorite of all the Star Wars films. And R.A. Salvatore had such a uphill battle to try to turn this into something good. I still didn't quite buy the love connection that happens in that movie and in that book. I thought he did as well as he could, and it was very well written, but just in the good category for me. All right, so the next one, Shaman's Crossing by Robin Hobb. Not my favorite work by Hobb. I don't think it's quite mid. It's definitely at least good. The trouble that I had with this one is the main character was just not compelling, and it just kind of tainted the whole work. It was one of those main characters that just didn't want to do anything, didn't want to make a decision. It was very frustrating to read at times. I will be reading the second book in that series after I post this, probably just a day or two after I post this. I'll be reading Forest Mage, which I heard is a crazy ride, so I'm looking forward to that. But a low entry for Robin Hobb in this thing. The next one is also by Hobb, so this is using her other name, her real name, Megan Lindholm, and this is Wizard of the Pigeons. And this one was just good as well. So, not a banner year for Hobb for me. The last 2 years have been, where she would be dominating the best of the best, because she is best of the best of favorite authors for me. But Wizard of the Pigeons, I really appreciated what she was trying to say thematically, and I just don't feel that she really pulled it off. So, I might be in a minority opinion of that, but Wizard of the Pigeons is just good. Book of Lost Tales Part 1. Fortunately, that's kind of mid. Even Christopher Tolkien in the foreword said that this is some of his father's less inspired works, and it was kind of drudgerous at times to read through that one. I'm starting actually tonight as I'm filming this Book of Lost Tales Part 2, so I hope Part 2 is better. All right, Gardens of the Moon. So Gardens of the Moon. So this one for me, I gave it a 3.5 when I originally read this. But I'm going to move it, which would probably be the good range, but I'm going to move it to great because I've been thinking about this book a lot. I've been thinking about a lot of the scenes, a lot of the characters in this book. So that rating is probably dipped for a while, and it's kind of going back up. I think these Malazan books, even though I DNF'd the third one, so I'm currently not reading the series, but I think that they need time to percolate. So Gardens of the Moon is great in my eyes at this point, and maybe I'll come back to Memories of Ice at some point. We shall see. All right, so the next one is Dead House Gates, and I love Dead House Gates. Dead House Gates is a truly outstanding book. My favorite of the two that I read. Perhaps one of the reasons that I may come back to the series is that I think of the characters in Dead House Gates, and I want to know what happened after that. And I know that House of Chains, it goes back to that setting, so we'll see. When I feel maybe that I'm ready and have some time to devote to Memories of Ice, I might be back into Malazan. All right, One Girl in All the World. This is set in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer universe, and is the second of a trilogy, and it works pretty well as if they ever wanted to reboot the television show, this would be the way to do it. And it's good. I wouldn't say it's great, fair, but it is enjoyable if you like the Buffyverse, and a lot of the characters from the show are in the books, and I think the characterization's pretty good, so that one's in the good category. All right, Kings of the Wild. Kings of the Wild, I think it's better than great. I think it's truly outstanding. This was probably my most fun read of the year. Kings of the Wild, Nicholas Eames took a fantasy setting, and he did a contrast with kind of like hair bands from the 1970s, and just a lot of parallels. And it's kind of a story of these aging rockers, these aging fantasy war band guys getting back together, and it's such fun. I laughed out loud so often in this book. It was such an enjoyable read. All right, Legend by David Gemmell, all the way to the top there. best of the best. That book was outstanding. That just blew me away. One of those that I had high expectations going in because I'd heard a lot of praise about Legend, but I didn't feel that it would be so good that I would immediately want to read absolutely everything that Gemmell's written. So Legend is legendary book. Second entry in the best of the best. Unfortunately, the sequel is kind of mid. King Beyond the Gate. Apparently, Gemmell wrote a different book as a sequel, and then the publisher wanted more like Legend, so this is kind of like a bad Hollywood sequel, and it's just very uninspired, so it's definitely in the mid category. No Heart for a Thief. This is a self-published work by James Lloyd Doolin, and I will say that my opinions on this seem to be in the minority just looking at reviews on Goodreads, but it didn't work for me. I felt structurally it was very flawed, and it really lessened my enjoyment from it because I just kept coming out of the story because I kept questioning the odd structure of the book and why it was structured that way, and it never kind of resolved itself. There was a good twist at the end that was kind of good, but that one unfortunately didn't work for me. I did like the writing, I did like the characterization of the main character, so I'll probably read the author again, but as far as that series, I won't come back to that one. Taipan by James Clavell, truly outstanding. That's the second book in the Asian saga. Had a great talk on Alan's channel with Alan and Kyle, if you want to go check that out sometime. But really, really great. I love how Clavell just juxtaposes the cultures, East and West, European, Asian, and he does such a good job at showing the different cultures and seeing the different characters, because he writes in a third-person omniscience, seeing all the characters learn from one another and kind of have their own opinions about the other cultures, and it was just fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading Gai Jin later this year as well. Robert McCammon's Swan Song. Man, that was a good one. That was my best book, I think, in February. I think it was maybe my book of the month. Swan Song was fantastic. It's a post-apocalyptic tale. Extremely great characterization, a little emotional at the end. It's right up there with The Stand as one of my favorites in that kind of epic length, post-apocalypse genre of book. Really, really fantastic read. Curse of the Fallen, this is by H.C. Newell. This is another self-published work, and I thought it was great. It was a lot grimmer than I was expecting it, and had a very compelling protagonist. I really liked the way that the author dealt with elves. There were some kind of different elves in there, and it was interesting. I read both that and Way of Edan the same month, and both books had elves in their story, which I love. I love the classic fantasy races. They're not used as much anymore, but I loved those. In both of those books, both of those authors had them they're not the elves that we know from Tolkien and others. And I kind of like that slant on it. But Curse of the Fallen, I actually interviewed the author on the channel, so go check that video out as well. All right, another self-pub. This is Jason Link's Angel from the Rust. And this is another great self-published work that I enjoyed. And it's kind of what I like, this is again another one kind of past an apocalypse, but it's, if I remember, like 50 or 100 years later, and they don't tell you how you got there or how the world became what it is. You kind of learn along the way, just little nuggets of information. I really like that. I like the protagonist. Protagonist was a musician that has some special abilities, and that was a really great read as well. All right, what do we got next? We got Piranesi by Susanna Clark. So, tough one. I want to say truly outstanding, but very close to best of the best. I want to try to keep this selective up here if I can, but Piranesi is one of those. I called it a literary fantasy because that's what it felt like. It's very, very well written. There's a lot of kind of symbolism and a lot of question marks in this book that make you wonder what's going on, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I need to read her other book as well. All right, John Williams Stoner, absolutely best of the best. This was fantastic. I read this one back in January, I believe. January or February. No, it was January because Joanna picked that for me as my January TBR. And Stoner is one of those books that it's a literary triumph because it's one of those books where you don't realize that you're connected until you realize that you're deeply connected to the story. And it's a short book. I highly recommend it. You've probably seen lots of booktubers talk about Stoner by John Williams. It's a masterpiece. All right, Killing Commendatore. This is a recent read, and this was one that I read in Japan. I did a travelogue as I was reading this one. This is somewhere between good and great. The first 4/5 of it was probably either great or truly outstanding. I didn't love the ending. I'm going to call it good, just because that great tier is starting to get clogged already, but it's still a really good book. I mean, Murakami is one of my favorites. Again, another top 10 author for me, but didn't quite stick the landing, in my opinion, in this one. All right, we have, Stanislav Lem, Solaris. That's a great work of science fiction. What I talked about, I remember when I did this review, because I think this was just 2 months ago. I think I read this in May. The thing that really blew me away with Solaris is how short it is and how thought-provoking it is. And that's one of my favorite things about science fiction. These authors are able to just kind of blow your mind in such a short volume. And there were just a lot of questions about that book. I love the atmospheric nature of it. Really, really great read. City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I would say that's another one that's in the great category. This one, I kind of compared this one in my dual review of this. I compared this one to a 19th century novel because you get so many different points of view and the book kind of layers upon itself. It really gave me, even though it's in a fantasy setting, it was giving me Les Miserables vibes more than anything else. So, very, very great book. I definitely need to read more of that author because I did like the writing style a lot, and I did enjoy that book tremendously. All right, Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. So this is another one. I'm putting it there for now, but it's going up to best of the best. This is one of the best memoirs I think I've read. This is another one I listened to, and another one, I think memoirs work really well as an audiobook when the person reading it, when they're obviously the author, but can deliver things very well. And he does. There's so much in here. There's humor, there's tragedy, there's sadness, there's so much going on. He does accents really well. He does characters very well. Thoroughly enjoyed Born a Crime. If you want to do a great audiobook listen, that's one of the best I've done. All right, The Aeronaut's Windlass by Jim Butcher. First Butcher book that I really, really enjoyed. I've only read 2 others. I read the first 2 of the Dresden Files, but didn't love those. Aeronaut's Windlass, really enjoyed it. It was like an 800-page book that just flew by, just remarkably. First of a series. I think the second book is coming out later this year, maybe. So I didn't have to wait 8 years like somebody told me that they had to wait 8 years because they read it when it came out. But I really liked the world building. The characterization was solid. And I could see why in that book that people like Jim Butcher. So I'm looking forward to reading more Butcher in this series and get back to Dresden Files at some point. All right, The Drop by Dennis Lehane. Not one of Lehane's best. Probably still a 4-star, 3.5 to 4-star read for me. So I got to put it in the good category. And I really, really enjoy Lehane. Probably not his best, but it's a pretty quick one. If you've never read Lehane, it might be a good entry point because it is so short. It's really only like 200 pages. You could probably read it in like 2 or 3 hours. But gritty crime fiction is kind of Lehane's signature, and this was definitely in that vein. All right, another work of crime fiction we have. This is The Enemy by Lee Child, and this is a Jack Reacher book. To put that in the great category. The Reacher books are a little uneven. Some of them, I'd say, for me, some of them are truly outstanding. Some of them go all the way down to mid. This one's kind of on the upper edge, one of the better ones. Very, very fast-paced, and he plots very, very well. There are just some aspects of some of the earlier books that I didn't like, but this one was fantastic. I read that one in record time. All right, Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Just kidding. Boy's Life is fantastic. Another one, like a top 15 of all time. I mean, these 6 books I have up here, I mean, truly best of the best. These are all just masterpieces in my mind. But Boy's Life, I mean, one of the best coming-of-age tales I have ever read. full stop. Fantastic book. Some magical elements in there, just great storytelling. Go check it out if you haven't. All right, Haruki Murakami, absolutely on music. This is his Conversations with Seiji Ozawa. I'm going to put this in the truly outstanding category. That's a 5-star read for me. It's maybe not a book for everybody because it is heavily into music, and it's conversation with a conductor, and the author is very knowledgeable, but I really enjoyed Absolutely on Music by Haruki Murakami. All right, 2 left. We have Forever Peace by Joe Haldeman. Forever Peace is a sequel to Forever War, and I thought it was just as good. I really enjoyed that series. I think Forever Free was probably the weak link of the 3, but Forever Peace, it's one of those, I don't want to give away anything, but he goes for a thematic idea of how this piece is going to happen, and it's really thought-provoking. And Haldeman's an author I need to definitely read more of, but I did enjoy Forever Peace tremendously. And the last one here, we're not going to end with a strong one. We're going to end with kind of a mid-thriller by Bentley Little called Dispatch. This was a thriller where the first 80% was fantastic, and then just the ending was just so lackluster and disappointing. I was very, very, very disappointed in the ending of that one. So I think we have a decent bell curve here. We have 6 in the best of the best. We have 7 in the mid. Truly outstanding and good are almost exactly the same, and then great is the highest. So I think I named my categories right. But of any of these, if you've read these, I'd love for you to tell me where I'm wrong, what you think differently about these. But this is the first half of my year. I'll probably do this again at the end of the year. Hopefully 50 more books so I can keep my streak. I think I've read 100 books like 3 or 4 years now. So we shall see. I have some chunkers on the way, so I honestly don't know if I will hit 100, but we'll see. We're at least halfway through the year, and I have read the first 50 books of the year. But hey, that's my tier list. Let me know what you've read this year. What is your S tier? What is your best of the best? I'd love to hear your best books of the year. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.